And now, to address the legal concerns of our community, AM 1310 The Light presents Legally Speaking. Here is today's host.
Good morning and Happy New Year to everyone that we've not communicated with this year. I hope that the year's come along just fine for all of you. We're broadcasting today. We're simulcast also on YouTube. Always feel free to subscribe to us on YouTube. Go ahead and register today because you can see the visual elements of what we're doing during the show. And it's just Nathaniel Lee. You can post it on YouTube and make sure you log in to subscribe. Today, we're going to be joined by a superstar panel. Again, attorney Vanita Banks, who masters in tax, one of the top lawyers in America, research analyst, and also Milton Grimes, a famous lawyer who tried one of the most famous trials in American history involving Rodney King. But before we get started, it's a summer day. We had a lot of things that happened in the legal community, but before we get started, though, we had a legal giant to pass yesterday, and we're going to have Attorney Banks talk about that initially, because I think people need to know where we've come from, how we made progress in this country, and some of the legal giants that oftentimes are overlooked. Attorney Banks, how are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you? And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Lonnie Grenier, tell us about her. Why is she important in American history?
Professor Lonnie Grenier, legal scholar, educator, civil rights theorist. She advocated for voting rights, and her scholarship focused on the relationship between democracy and the law and the role of gender and race in the political process, as well as university admissions, and a foremost scholar on affirmative action. She was the first African-American female tenured professor at Harvard University Law School. She recommended strategies for strengthening minority group voting power and rectifying unfair voting systems. Her scholarly focus was to ensure one person, one vote. And her book, and she authored so many publications. In 2015, her book entitled The Tyranny of the Meritocracy, Democratizing Higher Education in America. And in 1994, she authored the book, The Tyranny of the Majority, Fundamental Fairness in Representative Democracy. And so we have lost a giant this week, but her legacy will live on through those who have been inspired by her career and stand on her shoulders, as well as her publications will endure forever.
Well, one of the things that I recognize her for, from a historical standpoint, she's the first woman of color to be a tenured professor at the world's most prestigious law school, Harvard Law School. And she was nominated to be over the Civil Rights Division by President Clinton, and her nomination was sabotaged. It was disgraceful. Such a leading authoritarian figure. She was a professor at Harvard University, and her son is a professor at Harvard now. So it was a legal giant in our country, and she surely would be missed in many ways. We don't have many London Greniers that are coming through the pipeline of that caliber. She was an extraordinary legal mind and way ahead of her generation at the time. You know, her thought process were so outstanding, and she was criticized for advocating civil rights for all, you know, and it's a shameful episode in American history that President Clinton withdrew her nomination as Director of Civil Rights for the Justice Department?
As a result of a campaign to sabotage her nomination for Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and that campaign was launched, unfortunately, successfully by conservative journalists and Republican senators.
Wow, that's terrible. Now, the other issue is that we've also been joined by Attorney Milton Grimes. How you doing today, Attorney Grimes? Happy New Year, sir.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I got my schedule mixed up. I thought I was on another program, but it doesn't start till 9, so thank you for letting me in.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you're able to join us. We were just finishing up Lonnie Grenier, the legal giant, one of the legal giants of our generation, and she passed yesterday. But equally important though, we had another acting giant, Sidney Poitier. I was sad to hear what happened, that he died. I mean, he was in his 90s, and but I remember growing up watching some of his movies, and whether it was the detective he played, but Counselor, I tell you, he was a role model for actors today. He was the probably the best actor during his generation. I don't think there was anybody, white or black, that was a better actor than Sidney Poitier. But he transcended political norms by, I remember the famous movie, a lot of these people on our radio show may not remember this, but Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And, but the role he played in Detective Tibbs was just so extraordinary in terms of being the hotshot detective and solve this murder. But any comments, either counsel?
Well, I graduated from college in 1967. And one of the events in my life that gave me freedom was when Sidney Poitier smacked that cracker, that white man, in the heat of the night in the movie. And it was, I agree with Spike Lee last night on Don Lennon's show. It was a freedom-setting moment for people to be remembered forever. He was an impacting person and also somewhat humble to me. And he was a giant. So we've lost another one.
The world is mourning the loss of the great, the incomparable Sir Sidney Poitier. He was also a civil rights advocate. He participated in the 1963 March on Washington with his dear friend and brother Harry Belafonte and so many others. And of course, he was a trailblazer in Hollywood, the first African-American leading man. He opened doors for so many Black actors and actresses. He was every Black person's hero. He was a complete man, a gentleman, groundbreaking artist. I agree with you, Attorney Grimes. That scene was that the movie They Call Me Mr. Tibbs?
No, I think that was The Heat of the Night. I think.
The Heat of the Night. The Heat of the Night. When was it a police officer?
No, the police
you
officer.
Characterized him in another way, slapped him, and then he slapped him right back.
Listen, and when I use the derogatory term cracker, that was the portrayal of it in the movie. The man was a racist, a bigot, And when he said something, he smacked Poitier. Wham! And Poitier smacked him back. He smacked him. It's a reaction that has happened to all of us, I'm sure, at one time or another. We reacted before we thought about it. And he knocked, the man said, boy, at another time, I'd have you shot for this. He looked at him, stared him down, and he looked, the man looked over at the sheriff and said, what you gonna do about it? And I forget this sheriff's name, a famous actor. He said, I don't know it this time. He's like, I ain't doing nothing about it because I may get hit. It was comical.
I read about that scene. I read about that particular scene. And from what I read, Sidney required that they add him slapping.
Yeah, he wrote it in and had a contract saying you can't delete it from the finished product. Yeah.
Well, there couldn't be edited out.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a historical context to this, and let me tie it in why it's even relevant today. That famous movie that he did, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, in which he had the white girlfriend or fiance, and they came to dinner. They never had a romantic scene. And that was important. I went to law school, the University of Georgia, who's playing a national championship, right? I went to law school, and our school historically admitted Blacks back in the first Black male in 1961. When he was admitted to law school, the Black female was okay, but the Black male had to have the National Guard escort him around campus. The reason being is that white males did not want Black men talking to white women, so historically speaking. So that movie was a trailblazer at the time because it portrayed him not only breaking norm, but doing the one thing in which that was very key to the segregation issue at the time. And now we go full circles. Now we see these teams now have football team that primarily Black athletes, but it was a key moment in American history to see that on the screen, to see a person who he portrayed, he was a doctor, as I recall. And I watched that movie as a young person. It was just extraordinary to watch. I don't know if you guys remember that scene or not.
Yeah, I remember that scene. I also remember that your school, Georgia, is playing against the national champion, Alabama, and they're going to get whipped in the national championship. I saw you drop that little hint earlier.
I don't know. I think that...
You didn't catch him, Vanita? I caught it.
I don't know. I think that Alabama is the 33rd best football team on the planet. Maybe the 32nd. They may be better than the Jacksonville Jaguars. So,
right, I'm teasing.
We're playing an NFL caliber team, so it's hard to say.
Yeah.
They got a lot of talent, and usually most of those guys from Alabama end up playing on Sunday. Oh. But they're all here in Indianapolis, and the thing about it, the Indianapolis hosts a national championship now about every year in all these different categories. So it's a phenomenal thing in the city.
I just have to catch you in a serious moment, but getting back to the serious moment of Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte and the like, these guys had to fight something that the young actors today. Now, Chadwick Boseman is a favorite actor of mine forever because the young man studied his art. And there are a few others, but I believe art, music, the theater, the movies can do a lot with moving our culture forward. And I'm proud that Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte and others stepped forward, took firm stands, and helped to change this country. I remember the movie portrayed the incident where I think it was Nat King Cole got beat up by 5 or 6 white men down in the South singing on stage because he singing white folk songs or something for whatever the reason was. But these brothers, I tell lawyers today, my heroes are some of these trailblazers because we should be easy to go in a courtroom and argue for the rights of an individual when these people, men and women, face death. They face death by trying to take a seat or trying to eat a meal. And so a lawyer doesn't have any excuse for being fearful in the courtroom, in my opinion. I'm proud of being
Well, that's
Black.
a great segue into our next story. Amon Arbery. I watched yesterday the sentencing of the Arbery case. And I could truly say I was proud that in America, every now and then, justice is fair and justice is equal before law. The judge in that case did an extraordinary sentence. The two murderers, he sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And when they die and go to hell, they come back, they got 20 more years to do. And I thought that was an extraordinary sentence for convicted murderers of a Black man in South Georgia.
Yeah.
You know, I just thought it was just an extraordinary type thing in American history. And I don't recall any case that I've seen that I'm personally aware of in which somebody received a similar sentence like that for killing a Black man in America. I just don't remember any. I'm sure there are some somewhere, but I was searching, trying to find some. I couldn't find any.
Back in my first death penalty trial in the 80s in Orange County, I had to do some studying and got some data from a professor from Stanford, Professor Gross it was, and they had done some studies and comparisons of the percentage of white defendants being found guilty of killing Black men, or the percentage of white defendants found guilty of killing white women and white people and getting the death penalty. And then the reverse, the percentage of Black men found guilty of killing a white man or a white person and getting the death penalty. And the field was so wide in that rarely, and I say rarely, I don't have the figures before me now, would a white man be found guilty of killing a Black man, as opposed to the majority of the time, and close to 100%, a Black man would be found guilty of killing a white man and given the death penalty. So the disparity is great. Still, to this day, it's unusual. But in this case, we had it on video, and the jury did their job, and the judge has followed through. And someone asked me, well, if we have a president come along like Donald Trump, can he pardon him? Can he do that? I don't think so. I don't think a federal, a state court conviction and sentence can be pardoned or commuted by the president. A governor may be able to come along and do it, but I'm not sure a governor can touch that particular sentence. I haven't looked at the law on it, but I, like you, Nate, am thoroughly satisfied with the fact that the judge gave them a harsh sentence. I'm not quite sure if I totally agree on the time people get for crime, even murder, because I look at the time that Black folks have gotten throughout history, and I think it's a little bit arbitrary and draconian to bury people in prison for the rest of their life. Because when I look at countries like Norway, you only get 23 years for murder, and it can be mass murder. The young man who killed multiple people got 23 years because their rehabilitation program is so strong and successful. But we don't try to rehabilitate people and to the degree that these other countries are doing. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on about sentencing, but I'm not upset about the sentence.
Attorney Banks, I don't know whether you watched that sentence or not, but what I thought was significant, at no time did the lawyers or the defendants express any remorse. It appears that they were arrogant, pompous, and they thought that their client was justified with this heinous murder. I just couldn't get over it. You know, I know that you've argued a lot of these cases, Attorney Grimes, but the fact is that, you know, you got a jury verdict and they found you guilty of about a whole potpourri of felony murder type crimes, and you don't express any remorse or make an argument to the judge to say their client recognize and appreciate they made a significant mistake. You know, I didn't get that part.
The lawyers, excuse me for cutting you off, Anita. If I don't say this, I'll forget it. But the lawyers kind of, how do I say this? The lawyers, they had gone near argued that he was less than human because they went with the condition of his feet and talked about, his dirty feet and toes, and as if he didn't deserve to live. So I don't know the politics of the lawyers or the feelings of the lawyers towards African-American people, but there's a strong belief, Nate, in that we are not fully human and we aren't deserving of the protection of the law. So these lawyers seem to come from that breed.
Well,
I agree that this sentencing is an inflection point and historic for the reasons that Attorney Grimes and Lee have stated. And also keep in mind that the jury consisted of 9 white women, 2 white men, and 1 black man. And they found all 3 defendants guilty of murder. Travis and Greg McMichael, who were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole by Judge Walmsley, they were convicted of felony murder. And William Roddy Bryan was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Attorney Lee just stated that the father and son were sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole. But what resonated for me as well is the power of a praying mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, who would not rest until she got justice for her son. And of course, true justice would mean that Ahmaud Arbery would be with us today, but she achieved accountability. Remember that these defendants were not arrested. It took over 73 days for these defendants to be arrested. And I think also the sentencing reflected the power of the victim impact statements. Ahmaud Arbery was a son, he was a brother, he was a friend, and I thought that the victim impact statements were very, very powerful as well.
Yeah, it sort of
and of course, these 3 defendants face hate crime charges as well in a federal case.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Attorney Grimes.
No, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. It reminded me somewhat of the case that Nate and I discussed a couple of weeks ago, Screws, back in the 40s, where these cops killed this young black man because he wanted to have his gun and his Second Amendment right. And the sheriff of this town said, no, you can't have no gun. Black man can't carry no gun in my county. And they went out and got him, brought him back to the police station, to the town circle, and beat him to death, killed him because he wanted his pistol. He had the nerve to hire a white lawyer to try to get his pistol back. And the county prosecutor wouldn't prosecute the sheriff or his officers, even though the town people witnessed this killing of this young black man who all he wanted was his Second Amendment right. And the sheriff said he was uppity to demand his gun. So he didn't have a right to have a gun like everybody else. So the county prosecutor wouldn't prosecute him. The state attorney general wouldn't prosecute him. The federal government had to come in eventually and prosecute him. And I believe in this case, the county prosecutor would not prosecute initially these 3 men, and it ended up, I think the county prosecutor is being prosecuted now for obstruction of justice or something. So we've come a long ways, but we got a long ways to go.
Yeah, Okay, we'll take a caller now. Caller, you have a question or comment for us today? Hello?
Hey, Brother Nathan.
Happy New Year to you. How you doing, sir?
All right, doing all right. Wish I could be hitting some golf balls, but you know how it is. A couple quick questions that I thought I want to get you guys since the new year started. Number one, Supreme Court and the vaccine mandate on the federal level, because it seems like they're letting private businesses or schools uphold them, and then I guess they want to deal with this federal issue. So your opinion on that. And then number two, for you, Attorney Grimes, were you surprised by the Dante Wright verdict? Because that Saturday before the verdict, I was listening to you, you thought Kim Ford would be acquitted through the evidence, and yet she was convicted on all accounts. And then number three, we have the Atiana Jefferson trial going to come up. That's a young girl who was killed in her own home while she was playing the video games with her nephew. That officer has been out on bail since then, too. Seems to be a very delayed case down there in Texas.
Oh, wait a second. The second case, what was the second case you mentioned, sir? What was the second case?
Dante Wright case. Remember, Attorney Grimes thought that Kim Ford would be acquitted. And you said that when she took the stand, you thought that sealed her fate. So I would want his opinion on how does he feel now, or does he think the jury was wrong with that decision? And the third case is Atiana Jefferson. Look out for that one. That's the young girl who was sitting in her home playing video games, and the rookie cop shot through the window and killed her. They've taken forever, but it's supposed to be coming up, I think, in March. So thanks for taking my call, and Happy New Year, you guys.
Okay. If I may respond, Nate?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my response to that, sir, is I was looking at the evidence that I knew at the time that we talked. I was not aware of the evidence that came in later, to my knowledge, about she having cut off videos at other investigation scenes and some of the bad character evidence about her that came in that I was not knowledgeable of. And that's why when we speak, we got to qualify it with, I don't know all the facts. But with what I knew at that time, my thoughts were she has a good possibility of being found not guilty. Now, I understand afterwards, the next week, that evidence came in that was aggravating and harmful to her. So that's the only thing I can say about that. I still don't know all of the facts, but that's my explanation for that. Rarely do you get an officer being found guilty in situations where they can justify it with the suddenness of their decision and the intensity of the decision and the fear that they have at the time. Based upon my life experience of 47 years of practicing law and looking at these cases, they walk out of the courtroom with you. So that's my explanation, bro.
Well, the other thing, though, locally, I need to point out that historically, officers weren't prosecuted for this. They used qualified immunity on the civil side, and they were not prosecuted.
Right.
Rarely, if ever. Now we have a great prosecutor, Ryan Mears, that actually prosecuted cops. But historically speaking, that was not the case here in Indianapolis and across the country. So, but the second part, though, is that based upon the Supreme Court ruling, that officer would have been able to, based on a case that we presented to the Supreme Court, that was, I thought, just as egregious. Supreme Court gave the cop qualified immunity. Mm-hmm. And because when, in a narrow instance, when they say they tried to put him in handcuffs and he got back in the car to pull off, and the other officer, his life was in danger. In that situation, the Supreme Court and these draconian decisions, they are bad decisions, have said that the officer is entitled to qualified immunity. And so in that situation, that officer would be found not guilty. And also, there's rule of evidence 403 that deal with prejudicial evidence. So a lot of times when you're doing trials, a certain type of evidence comes in and others doesn't come in. And so, but in that moment in time, that's just narrow 5 to 7 second interval. If you look at the cases, the Supreme Court has been giving officers qualified immunity. And this is bad. This is a judicial created defense, and been a nightmare for us in the civil practice when we try to sue police officers and hold them accountable. And so I want people to realize that this conviction of that police officer is an exception and not the general rule.
And there will be an appeal of that conviction.
Yes. And so we don't know how this is going to turn out. I mean, yeah, she was convicted, but I like to see what's going to happen upon the appeal.
Right.
It's going to be interesting to see whether or not the officer conviction is overturned on appeal.
Right. So in the other case this young man asked about is that's Dante Wright about in Jefferson, it's in Texas, about the video, the killing of the woman playing video games with her nephew. I don't know the facts of that particular case. I don't know why there's a delay in the trial, but it's not unusual for criminal cases, especially murder cases, to go 3, 4, 5 years before trial. So that's all I can say.
Well, see, locally, I don't know what's going on in your part of the woods, but locally, our jury trials have been suspended again.
Right.
In 2.5 years, I've not been able to do a simple jury trial of any kind. We did traditionally 8 to 10 per year, and I've had 0 for the last 2.5 years. Most frustrating part of my professional career, inability to conclude cases because we can't get trials. And now, because of the increase, folks, we have a pandemic that's never been seen by our American judicial system. This pandemic is a lot worse than what people realize in terms of the effect on our legal community. This week alone, we had about 40 or 50 staff members of the court contract this virus, and the court system basically gets shut down. You know, so this problem is so bad until we have a backlog of cases now that's going to result in cases being delayed up to about 4 years more. And so what I think we have to do is that I'm going to send a note to the Supreme Court. I think that we have to extend our statute of limitation in Indiana so we could reduce the number of cases being filed now to let the system catch up. Because I think that with this big backlog is bad for victims. Victim cases get pushed to the side because judges have so many cases. They just said we need to get rid of some of these cases, and who get punished? The victims, because they get this backlog of 4 or 5 years of cases. And what do? You can't try them all anymore. And you know, we've given preference to criminal cases. So under Trial Rule 4, a criminal case defendants incarcerated have to have a trial within a year. Well, if you can't do jury trials, and the only thing you can do is those few felony cases, and your 40,000 civil cases that are pending, they can't go to trial. And so this is a legal nightmare for us that we're dealing with. So I want people to understand that our legal system is at a standstill. You know, you have cases that are pending in court. They're not going anywhere right now, for the most part.
I wanted to go back to the Kim Potter case for a moment. I think that the verdict was the right verdict, although many of us didn't anticipate it for all the reasons that my colleagues have stated, including the massive qualified immunity hurdle. And as you know, she admitted that she made a mistake in using her gun instead of her taser, and that the killing was an accident. But this case stands for the proposition that a police officer may still be held criminally liable in situations where they have been negligent. And in this case, the jury held that even though it was an accident or a mistake, that there still should be accountability. Mm-hmm. Again, an exception, but I think the right decision. What do you think, Attorney Lee?
Well, I thought that the killing was an excessive use of force, and I applaud their effort for obtaining the conviction. I hope that the defense on appeal does not prevail, because that case would have far-reaching effect from cases all over the country, in the sense that this qualified immunity defense is running rampant. And with the introduction of these new federal judges, we probably going to see more aberration of Black American males' particular rights when they are shot and killed by police officers. So I think anytime that we could have a situation where they get convicted for killing somebody in these circumstances, that is a positive thing for our community, because it's a deterrent, in my mind, to officers making that decision to take someone's life unnecessarily. So I applaud the decision, but at the same time, I'm a little bit nervous about the appellate rights here. Everybody got a right to appeal, and statistically speaking, you lose the appeal most of the time. But in this case here, I think it's going to be a close issue. And now we had another comment from Pierre that he sent us an email, Attorney Grimes. What about the young girl that was shot by a cop in the mall? Reverend Sharpton will preach the funeral. I doubt the cop will be prosecuted for reckless behavior. I'm not familiar with that case, Attorney Grimes. Which case did you talk about, a lady?
This is a young 14-year-old girl, Latino girl from Chile.
That was in California.
Yeah.
That's why I addressed it. Oh, what happened?
She and her mother were shopping, and she was in a dressing room trying on a dress for her coming out at 14. And a man was there, a young African-American man was in the same store, and he had lost it, and he was attacking people with a bicycle lock on a chain, is my best understanding. And he had beaten a person, and he had sought out a second victim and was beating them with the chain, and the police was called, or with the lock, and the police arrived. And from what I understand, the officers told this officer, slow down. And he proceeded, when they came in, they saw the suspect, and the suspect was moving or running, but he wasn't at that moment attacking anyone, but he may have been going after someone that they did not see. All the evidence is not in, again, guys, but based on the evidence that they had in front of them, there was no person seeing that was the next victim. It could have been suspected that there's going to be another victim, and this cop shot, bam, with the rifle 2 or 3 times, and one of the bullets went through a wall and killed this 14-year-old girl who was in the dressing room with her mom. So his conduct was reckless and abandoned, and I don't think it rises to the level of the case where the young man was killed on the road, the Dante Wright case, where the young man was killed on the road after resisting the police and taking off in the car. And this woman saying, the woman officer saying it was an accident. This is not an accidental shooting in the case in that department store. But, you know, I'm not endorsing the killing of Dante Wright by the police. I'm not saying it's justified, but I believe, I know in California, I won a couple of murder cases based upon accidental shooting, the unintended shooting of a gun, even though a person have it in their hand. That is a defense in California. Accident is a defense. And oftentimes accidents are caused by negligence at some point or another. So I have a concern that there'll probably be, I believe there's going to be a strong argument about a reversal of that conviction, but I also understand the law, I think, on when a person is not held responsible for a criminal offense in an accidental situation. And that's what I have to say about those 2 cases.
It is my understanding, and the facts may not all be in that the shooting officer is African American. I'm not saying that matters.
I heard that.
Who also has a history of advocating for police reform in communities. And so the question becomes whether or not it was, unreasonable and criminally negligent for him to, or the use of unreasonable force in using his gun in a department store where it is probable that, numerous innocent customers would be present.
Right.
We also understand that this gentleman in the store, with this chain lock, I saw video of him dragging a customer in the store. We also saw blood on the floor, presumably a customer's blood. And so this is going to be an interesting situation as well. The question boiling down to the reasonableness of him using his firearm in that department store populated with many customers.
Yeah, it's going to be a strong question for that, even though he may have advocated for police reform. But what did he do at that moment in time? Did he see the dragging of the other people before he shot? What did he see? What did he have in his computer to justify shooting in a risky situation like that? So
there's another factor too. There's two more factors. What was he told? What was communicated to him under his police transmission? Did they tell him that the suspect?
And what did he see, Nate?
Pardon?
And what did he see at the time he came in there?
Yeah, see, because what if he was told that the suspect was in the process of killing someone? I'll be interested in seeing the police. There's communication band between police officers that's transmitted, that's separate and apart from 911 transmission. And so the police transmittal, I'd be fascinated to see exactly what they were being told real time. So when this event is transpiring, there's communication. So they say suspect is about to kill 3 people, or this could be a mass murder. It's all kind of factors. So I'd be interested to see how this case developed. But at a minimum, you got a situation whereby he's responsible for the path that his bullet traveled. At the end of the day, so like when you hit an errant golf shot, golfers are responsible for the path of travel of your golf ball. So he's got bullets flying everywhere. I think he's civilly responsible for where the bullet goes. But the criminal side of it is a different matter. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Is that case going to a grand jury, or what's the status?
I would imagine the district attorney would take it to a grand jury, Nathaniel, before doing anything. I don't know. Don't know what they've decided yet, but I got a case sitting in the district attorney's lap now that's over 5 years old. It's reaching the 6th year in February, and they haven't decided whether to prosecute 5 cops who were fired after shooting and killing 2 people in a car. So, and we've settled the civil part of the case. So we got a new DA in town. We got a new sheriff in town. So we'll see what happens.
Well, is the new DA taking?
Gascon is his name. He's doing more to look at police conduct than the previous district attorney did, sadly enough, but we'll see.
Well, that was interesting because your previous district attorney in LA was an African-American female, wasn't there?
Yes, I didn't say that, but yes, and I supported her when she ran strongly, but she did not, for whatever the reasons, fulfill her promise to the people. And she was heavily financially supported by pro-police unions throughout the state for millions of dollars. And I think it took away her objectivity.
And she lost badly to
Lost badly to a liberal or to a person who was saying they were going to change the law, whose judges have gone against some of his decisions, whose deputy DAs have gone against even articulating and going forward with some of his decisions, such as striking 3-strike laws, not applying gun enhancements to certain cases, and these kind of change scenery on prosecuting.
Hello?
Yeah, what happened is that he had some internet freeze there for a second. Attorney Grimes, we missed the last part of what you were saying because your internet froze up.
I said this new DA has come to town with some laws that affect minority defendants to a great degree in lessening the sentences and in lessening the allegations for gun enhancement, priors enhancement, prison enhancement, and saying, no, we got to give a cleaner slate to some of these defendants. We got to look at them individually. And so there's an uproar in the courts here. Some of the judges don't want to accept the not filing of priors or 3 strikes against some defendants in some cases. So, you know, it's not settled yet what's going to happen.
Well, one final comment. The gentleman who raised his question says that the LA prosecutor should prosecute this police officer. And
I don't know. I haven't seen all the facts. I appreciate that gentleman's question, but oftentimes we get a knee-jerk reaction because we have a young innocent child that was killed, and I appreciate that. We got an officer, we got an African-American officer who's active in community activities. You know, it's not an easy job.
yeah,
So we got to see.
Attorney Banks?
I agree.
Sorry, go ahead, Banks.
No, go ahead. I agree with everything that you have said, Attorney Grimes. We just have to wait and see. We've laid out our perspective and some of the factors and considerations, and we'll just have to see how this plays out in the future.
Yeah.
I do see the civil liability clearly, but the criminal aspects, more to follow.
Yeah.
Well, if, you know, I've sued stores all the time so people would know. In that type of litigation, you kind of sue the store also because what led to the condition of this person randomly attacking folks inside the store. So I think that the store themselves, if you do it on the civil side, it's not just the police officer that you would file litigation against. You also file against the store in the premise liability theory and failed to provide a safe environment, their invited guests. And so, you know, I'm wondering, you have these large department stores, you have a rash of these crimes that occur in this smash and grab. It's foreseeable that you're going to have people doing crazy stuff like this, and they should have security. And
that's very true. And we're seeing these smash and grab situations all across the country. And here in the Chicagoland area, almost every day, we're seeing these robberies of large luxury stores on Magnificent Mile, for example, and across the country in Beverly Hills. And my question becomes, and I was looking at the fact that, you know, in Beverly Hills, they've got so many cameras out. And I'm just wondering, how is it that with all the prior robberies that it's still happening? It could be, of course, a lack of sufficient number of police officers, but how is this able to happen every day in broad daylight without these individuals being apprehended?
Well, Vanita, I think when it started out up in San Francisco, there were estimated 80-some people who ran into the Nordstrom and snatching stuff, and it was after hours, and it's hard for the cops to arrive in time and apprehend because the typical call time may take 2 minutes. And if you have laid out your place and thought about it, you can be in and out of there in a minute and a half or two. So I can, and they've been catching a few of the people that they have taken the task of putting stakeouts or having more patrols in certain areas. But when people bum rush you and gang rush you, the chances are some of them are going to get away. So I can see that.
Were these suspects
Absolutely.
wearing masks? Attorney Banks or Grimes, were they wearing masks and gloves and stuff or what?
I don't know about gloves and stuff, about fingerprinting and all that, but I believe masks was part of their disguise or cover up. But I hear you, Vanita. It's frustrating and fearful because you could be in there shopping one day, and if they decide to burst in and in mass just start taking and snatching stuff, they're not going to have that many cops around to stop that to a degree. It's just.
Yeah, I was asking that partially in response to Attorney Lee's point about suing the department stores for, quote, lack of security.
Mhm.
And of course, you can hire private security. And I've read, across the nation, companies, the stores and different merchant groups are retaining personal security. And then, of course, we're seeing some of these establishments being robbed, multiple times.
Right. I think.
And it just seems to me that there's kind of like a lack of anticipation. I mean, once it's happening ubiquitously, why is it that every night we're seeing that it's happening again?
Right.
So I think that partially due to just lack of sufficient police staff. I mean, I'm just really amazed about how the Chicagoland downtown Magnificent Mile is being terrorized, at this point without sufficient police involvement.
Well, the merchants probably have to balance. Do we make sales and make money, or do we save people and protect people? We'd have to let one customer in the store at a time, or no more than 5 at a time, and keep people lined up outside till the next group can come in. That way we won't be letting in a bunch of people at the same time. So they probably could stop this, but they'll lose a lot of money. So which is more important, making the money or the safety of people?
That's the $1 million question. In conclusion to this issue, because we had to close out today, I like everybody to know that this is a live call-in show, and next Saturday we're going to continue our discussion about all these relevant legal issues today. But security is a big problem in America. We see a proliferation of increase in violent crimes. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, that one of the things that I thought was important was the Michigan case that we didn't discuss, where the student goes in and try to murder everyone at the school and then indict the parents. I think that legal case should be a wake-up call to a lot of parents. And we can discuss that next week, because I think it's got some important factors that could maybe serve as a deterrent for future crime. But I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening in today. And I'd like to thank our superstar guest panel, Attorney Banks and Attorney Grimes, for joining us today. So until next Saturday, may God bless and keep you, and stay warm. And have a great day.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year, everyone.